underway. Free agency underway. We're moving on. The Buffalo Bills starting to fill some holes, we'll say. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast. Kevin Carroll, Andy Young with you. Always a fun time of year, Andy, to get stuff at least on paper and dream of what might happen next fall. But we're still a ways away. But the Bills active to start off free agency as one would expect.
Yeah, and they trot out the shiny new toys. Some of them, at least, here on Thursday as we record this. New league year started Wednesday. Thursday, we see Joey Bosa arrive. We see Joshua Palmer arrive. We see others show up, Derek Forrest. And this is that time of year, like you said, Kevin, when folks can start to imagine how this is all going to fit together for the Bills. And they can be the armchair GMs and pick it apart.
Right.
Or say, I would have done this, or that's a terrible signing, or why haven't they made a trade? But right now, the guys are coming in, and I think Joey Bosa is certainly the headliner of this class, and awesome quote from him about what Josh Allen said to him.
Yeah, Joey Bosa, the big name. I was thinking, is this as big, not as big, or on par with Von Miller a few years ago? Same position, so we're obviously going to flock to that. Vaughn came kind of as a surprise. Joey Bosa, I viewed it as a bit of a surprise, but not as shocked as when they landed Von Miller. And maybe that's just my age and being around the team so much. But, you know, he gets a one-year deal. He's been banged up a lot. He even brought up that he knows he's getting older. It's hard to believe in the NFL you're under 30 and getting older. But, yeah, he did say that Josh Allen texted him, I believe, something that really gets the juices flowing if you're part of Bills Mafia.
Yeah, I put this out on X. I said, hell of a quote from Joey Bosa about trying to bring a championship to the Buffalo Bills. Josh texted me that if we do what we set out to do, we could really be immortalized in this town. And that is absolutely the truth. If Josh Allen and Joey Bosa and 51 other guys go on to bring the Buffalo Bills a Super Bowl, there's a case to be made that all of them get a statue.
Absolutely, Andy. Josh Allen's probably getting one anyways.
Right.
But if Joey Bosa, and he said this during the press conference, that he doesn't think he's the missing piece to get the Bills past the Chiefs and win the Super Bowl. But if he does what he's brought in to do, and he brought up that he's used to playing against the Chiefs while with the Chargers, he knows how to get to Patrick Mahomes. If the Chiefs are driving in another AFC championship and Bosa gets like a strip sack and they go on to win, people will look at that as you were one of the keys to us finally getting over the hump. So that's there, but Bosa coming off, as a really interesting dude. Seems very chill, like some of the times.
But funny.
Right, some of the times you were like, wait, was that a joke? Where's he go? But, yeah, I think for the most part, just listening to the guy, it's like comes across as one of those players that's very chill off the field and likes to wreak havoc on it.
But he was very introspective, too, I think, about where he is in his career. You mentioned it. He said, I'm getting old. It's time to win.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he knows that the Father Time always wins, and the clock is ticking on his career. And at 29 years old, he'll be 30 during the season, that he doesn't have a lot of years left. You brought up Von Miller. When Von Miller came, he had already won 2 Super Bowls. He had been a Super Bowl MVP. Joey Bosa, I don't think is as big of a signing because he, while younger, has not put together the career that Von Miller has. You remember, Von Miller was literally coming off a Super Bowl win, in which he was impactful in that run for the Rams. But Bosa certainly, if he can stay healthy, that's the biggest key with him because the last 3 seasons, he has not been able to stay healthy. He did play in 14 games last season, but said that in the regular season, but said that he was playing at about 60 to 70%, and he just wasn't himself. He said he went into training camp and into the season feeling the best he had felt in his 9-year career. I mean, this is a guy that's put up more than 70 sacks in the regular season. over the course of his career, but hasn't had double-digit sacks since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So the overall production hasn't been there, and I think injuries have really gotten in his way for a guy who was touted as one of the best pass rushers to come out in his class from Ohio State.
Number 3 overall, 5-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
Although
you've got a couple of Pro Bowls under your belt at this point. You know, guys get injured. They don't want to go down to Orlando. Kevin Carroll's suiting up at wide receiver.
Eventually,
Sacred Heart's
happen.
finest.
Yes! Finest, that might be a stretch, Andy. But, yeah, and for those who want to look back at the prime Joey Bosa, the one that the Bills would like to see play for them, Bosa pointing out that some of his best games came against the Bills. Hopefully that will translate to now that he's part of the Bills.
2-3 sacks against Josh Allen.
I believe
2020.
one of them was during the COVID season
Yes.
when no one was there.
That's
right?
what we're talking about. Yeah. One of the plays, Josh looks like he's going to go on a keeper, and Bosa just penetrates, stands him up right in the backfield. It's kind of a cool hit.
Yeah.
I'm sure Josh Allen loved it. Josh is kind of a weirdo. He likes that stuff.
Right.
Remember he said he needs to take a couple of hits to feel like he's in the game?
I kind of agree with that.
I mean,
that gets the nerves out of.
Yeah.
Once you get whacked, the nerves.
Right. All right, let's do this. Right?
Are you gonna whack me?
No. Let's leave that one there. But yeah, Bosa. This is going to go off the rails real quick. Let's get it back on.
Focus up.
Yeah, let's get off to the races here. To think about a guy that's had seasons of 10.5, 12.5, 11.5, 10.5 sacks, but he's far removed from those years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that it's really important for him to come here and have a clean slate from that injury standpoint, to put that behind him, to do what he can to get with the trainers here. Maybe they can offer something different. You got to remember, Bills are looking for a new strength and conditioning coach, too. We'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bosa, if he can reclaim some of that form and be healthy down the stretch, that's huge. He was asked about the snaps and the number of plays that he could possibly play, and that the Bills often rotate their defensive ends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Von Miller played less than 25% of the snaps last season. Can Bosa play 35, 45 snaps a game? That's what he said was kind of the sweet spot to stay fresh.
Right.
And try to stay healthy as you can. And his focus really is on that. I mean, he's a confident guy. He's like, look, I know I'm really good when I'm healthy. I just have to figure that out.
And I like, he was humble at times, but then he said he is the starter.
Right.
He came out and was like, well, I'm the starter, but later on he was like, it's not just me. They have a great rotation here and this and that kind of stuff. So 1-year deal, you hope you get the top of the line Joey Bosa and then see what the future holds from there.
This is time and time again about what we've talked about so often with the Bills. They need that defense at some point in the big moments in the playoffs, against the Chiefs particularly, to rise up, make the big play. You can argue that they had a couple of stops in the second half, and that allowed the Bills' offense to have them take the lead. But they still need that closer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if the Bills' offense gets the ball back, have a spot where Joey Bosa or whomever, Greg Rousseau, gets the big sack on 3rd or 4th down on that drive where Mahomes needs to push it down the field to get the Chiefs back in the lead.
Right.
You're looking for that closer. It's why they brought in Von Miller. It's why they keep turning the wheel on the defensive line to get this figured out. Joey Bosa's high reward, low risk to me. Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been the player he was, but that guy's still in there. He's not 35 years old. He's going to be 30, and that's still a prime time. It's, can he stay healthy? Because he's shown when he can, he's one of the elite forces. Sleeping over there?
I just started. You're not boring me. I've been up a long time today, and I'm running out of steam.
It's all right. It's called a pregnant pause.
His teammate, Joshua Palmer, if we want to move on, with the Chargers, gets a 3-year deal with the Bills, wide receiver. We know that the Bills needed a different style of wide receiver. It seemed like they had a lot of this. We talked about separation was a big issue for the Bills at times last year. Amari Cooper comes over, things kind of change, but Amari Cooper is a free agent out there. Bills elect to go with Joshua Palmer from the Chargers. When I first saw that, Andy, I had to think of who Joshua Palmer was at first.
And he prefers Joshua, especially when it's written.
Right.
If he sees the written word, either in an article or on a graphic on television, he prefers Joshua. In conversation, he said it's fine if you say Josh, Joshua, whatever slips off the tongue. But in print, it's Joshua Palmer.
Well, with my spelling, if I'm putting it in print, it's probably going to be Josh, or I'm going to spell it wrong.
It's 3 more letters. 2. U-A.
We call him the J-Man. Oh, no, that's taken already.
All right.
So he appears to be that piece that can get separation, not through his speed, Andy, but through his route running.
And it's a different type of separation. It's separation like at the top of a route to where he breaks open just enough to catch the ball. He's not a Diggs, like a precise route runner who's going to, or a Cole Beasley, who's just by the way they run their routes and their shake and bake, going to throw a guy off 10 yards away and you're wide open.
Right.
The highlights in the film that I've looked at him, he doesn't often get wide open, but he does just enough. He's got a knack for keeping his routes look the same and then making that sudden move to get that little bit of separation to where the quarterback can find him. He said that's one of the things he prides himself on. He prides himself on the ability to play any of the wide receiver positions, whether that's in the slot, as a Z or a flanker, or as an X, which is kind of the guy on the line of scrimmage that often has to block as well. That's kind of the role they often envisioned for Keon Coleman. So I think he's a guy that is not A1 alpha. This is Stephon Diggs.
Okay, I was going
Right.
to say, this isn't the next coming. I mean, this dude's
who knows?
young.
Who
still
knows?
young.
Right? Yeah. Who knows? But Diggs showed more flashes earlier of that in Minnesota by this time. But he said that he thinks he's scratched the surface, but he's just scratching the surface on the type of player he can be. And who knows, with Allen, maybe that unleashes a little more. The Bills are a funky offense in that they put up a ton of points, but they don't often have, at least the last couple of years, as Diggs was kind of phased out his last year, that go-to guy. We've talked about that a ton of times, and one of the selling points for Joshua Palmer was talking to Joe Brady in that everybody eats thing, right? Everybody gets a chance. Everybody gets a shot, and it's game to game. Sometimes it's quarter to quarter, series to series. Who's really going to be involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Andy, he's a native of Brampton, Ontario, and quite familiar with the Buffalo Bills, having grown up in the area. Was he the one who mentioned watching the Jim Kelly Marino games, or was that?
That was Bosa.
That was Bosa.
Because Bosa's dad played for the Dolphins.
That's what it was.
Yes.
It's all running together for me.
But Joshua Palmer did recall going to a Bills preseason game when he was young. Knew that there were a lot of Bills fans in southern Ontario, in the Toronto area, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours away, right? Like, the Bills played their Toronto series there for a few faulty seasons, right?
Yeah.
He said he didn't grow up a big Bills fan. He was more of a basketball guy. He thought he was going to go to the NBA. Loved the Raptors.
I love what he said when it came to that. Dreamt of going to the NBA, but he was just so much better at football. That's just confidence right there, knowing which way to go.
To be that kind of an athlete, too.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to play in the NBA, but guess the NFL is going to have to suffice.
I know. I think that's where I made the mistake of playing football instead of hockey, but we'll get into that.
I've seen you play hockey.
Yeah, okay. But, again, another guy, talked to Josh Allen for a bit. Looks like he's going to be a good fit in the wide receiver room and gives the team right now. And again, we're talking here in March, but another player brought in that on paper looks like he's going to have a role with the team.
Absolutely.
I think other signings in the past that we got all worked up on stick with me nowadays.
Like when you thought Mac Hollins was a horrible signing,
Now he's with the Patriots.
and you loved him by the end of the year.
I loved him.
You gotta let it play out, man.
Curtis Samuel. Is that there?
Yes.
Yeah. Curtis Samuel, I thought was going to be the key part of the offense. And then he had injury, early struggles, but he came around towards the end and still in the mix here, too.
Look, I think Palmer is absolutely going to have a role. I think he's your guy that can win a little bit in man coverage. I think he's your guy that can get open downfield a little bit in a different way than some of the other guys. Obviously, a lot of it's going to go through Shakir still.
Yeah.
I still think they need just some speed.
Mm-hmm.
Add some more straight line, horizontal and vertical speed. Guys that can get down the field, and that might be coming in the draft. There's some guys out there that are going to show those flashes, that are going to be available, whether that's pick 30. I think less and less now that they're going to take a receiver at that spot in the first round.
Right.
But second round, they don't have a third rounder, but a couple of fourth round picks, a couple of second round picks. That's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Defensive side of the ball, safety Derek Forrest gets a 1-year deal coming from the Washington Commanders. Early in his career, things looked like they were going well, but have kind of fizzled the last few years. But now the safety competition gets interesting. Damar Hamlin back too, which I really thought that he was going to move on, or they were going to move on, but we heard from Damar too. But
Isn't Damar awesome when he gets in that press conference setting? The way he speaks and the way that he talks about his perspective on life and the things he's gone through, and even just beyond that, just the way that he approaches. He talked a lot about how even if he left the Bills, he didn't want his friendships and the relationships that he's built over the years to change, and for the business side to alter the personal side, and just kind of really, to me, a deep soul.
And he lit up during the press conference when asked if other teams were interested in him and how many, and him just talking about seeing that love out there, that teams were interested and watched his film and were like, you could be a great addition to our team. Ultimately, he stays with the Bills, but
he wanted to be where he was comfortable. That was a big thing that he said, that the way that the Bills organization has basically raised him up. He said that Buffalo is home to me. Mm-hmm. This is a place I find peace and comfort. I mean, dude grew up in Pittsburgh, not far away. Family can easily get up here. And he said, look, I understand the playbook. I want to be a leader. I want to help this team and push people in competition to get better and better and better. And speaking of competition, he's probably going to have it from Cole Bishop.
Right.
Because I can see a lot of people, and I was one of them, thought maybe Damar Hamlin walks and they just go with Bishop. But I think there's going to be some competition there. And if Cole Bishop isn't doing the things he needs to do, isn't panning out early as the guy they need, hey, that's not a bad thing to have Damar Hamlin there waiting in the wings, just like he was this past offseason when we thought he was fourth or fifth in line, and he ends up winning the starting job.
Yeah, and now so you have Cole Bishop, Rapp, Hamlin, Derek Foster comes in. Forrest, I keep saying Foster. So there's depth. I mean, it seems like the safety position over the last few years gets banged up a lot, and that you got to have guys come in to kind of backfill. And I think there was a lot of talk that the safety position might be thin. It might just be Cole Bishop and Rapp, and you got more bodies there now that have been able to do stuff in the NFL.
Yeah, and I don't think that you can rule out how Derek Forrest tries to bounce back. 2021, he had a very good season, started all year for the Commanders, and then got hurt. And he's had a couple of down years. 2022 it was, where he had a really nice season.
Yeah.
23 got hurt. 24 never really saw the field much, played in 10 games, only started 1. That's a guy who prides himself on his athleticism, his ability to hit, and that's kind of something you need. And you're right. It won't preclude the Bills, though, I think, from drafting a safety, too.
Right.
DeMar Hamlin's contract, I don't think, is going to prohibit that. Derek Forrest, I don't think his contract is going to prohibit that. So if they find a guy that they really like for competition, you need bodies for camp at the very least. So I would assume that they'll probably look a little more at safety. I don't know that they'll find a starter right off the bat, but I think they're going to explore that position too still.
Yeah. So we're going with guys, the way I put this out, that the Bills have told us they've signed. We know there are other people, now on the team because they're going to be introduced to the media on Friday this week. But we'll stick with this grouping here. Darrington Evans, running back with the Bills for the 3rd time. I don't believe he's ever seen the playing field, correct?
No, and he actually has officially signed, Darrington Evans, but they didn't trot him out today.
Right.
However,
right.
Yeah, but he's a guy that has been through training camp a couple of times with them, was injured, was on injured reserve, I believe, into the start of last season, then ended up getting released, ends up on Chicago.
Right.
But he's back, and if you look at it, the Bills have basically, with Reggie Gilliam coming back too, their entire same running back room that they had.
Right. So Ty Johnson gets a new deal.
Right. James Cook is already there.
James Cook
wants a new deal.
Wants a new deal.
Right. You've got
and
Ray
is
Davis.
the lead horse. Ray
and then
Davis.
You've got Frank Gore, and you've got Darrington Evans. It's the same crew they've brought back again with Reggie Gilliam in that fullback role, kind of the tight end fullback deal. So same thing. He's depth. I wouldn't expect that he makes the team, especially with Ty Johnson getting his new deal, because that's a guy who we all thought was awesome in his role. Became a really good third down back. I think Josh said he thinks he's the best third down back in the league.
I concur with that from what you saw.
Yeah, big plays, explosive ability, trust him in pass protection, and so then you're probably running it back with your same 3 guys.
Well, how do you think this James Cook thing plays out?
Well, that's the interesting part. I don't think they're going to pay him $15 million.
Can't.
I think they would entertain signing him for a couple of more years, but I don't think he's going to get the price that he wants. I think that it'll be a test, a litmus test of what Bean and McDermott believe about the running back position, because it's kind of been a rinse and repeat. We draft guys, we let them play out, we draft another guy. Let that guy come in, let it play out, and while that's happening, we're drafting the next guy. They've done it with Singletary, did it with Cook, then they draft Ray Davis, and it's one of those positions where it feels like they could just keep replenishing it that way. I don't think they were expecting James Cook to score nearly 20 touchdowns.
Right. And
for the running back resurgence, quote unquote, around the league to take off the way it has and guys getting paid, that maybe changes things. I don't know if that changes their model and their perception of James Cook's talent, his value to the team versus that position overall.
20 touchdowns in a season, that's what I'm sure James Cook is presenting. I don't see that being the norm when it comes to James. It could well be.
I mean,
but when you have Josh Allen, and
that's exactly why it could be. Right? Because they're in a lot of positions offensively. I mean, he broke a ton of explosive plays.
Right.
And when teams are gearing up to try to stop Allen and his running ability and throwing ability, that obviously creates openings for Cook. And he was such a good complement to Allen because he had that explosiveness. He was one of the few players on the Bills offense that are explosive, that have that extra gear and that extra speed to break away, to take a pitch and run outside and, oh, the defensive end's coming up on me. I'm going to make a little wiggle move and turn a 3-yard loss into an 8-yard gain because I can get to the edge faster than anybody.
Scoring touchdowns with his hair being pulled. The touchdown against the Chiefs where he put his arm down, and you see those guys do that during practice to see it executed like that in a game. So
do you pay a running back top dollar?
No.
Right.
I mean, I get it. you mentioned the resurgence and the NFL with ebbs and flows, that it's a passing league and then shifts back to a running league. But I think we're at the point right now with how the quarterback is these days and how offenses work that you're now using the run to open the passing game back up, and then the passing game will be key. I just don't see putting that kind of money and that kind of commitment into a running back, Saquon Barkley aside, with what he was able to do this past season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't ultimately think that he gets what he wants. I do think they will entertain the possibility of giving him some sort of extension. But he may not want – he may say, I want top dollar, and I'm going to test free agency. And I think that may be how it plays out.
Yep. So we'll see. Other guys that are with the Bills now, but the Bills haven't officially released their signings. We'll go to defensive tackle, Andy, and Larry Ogunjobi coming over. Bills, we know they needed defensive tackle help. That was one of the areas where we're hoping for some sort of improvement. You have a guy here who's with the Steelers last, with the Browns, over 27 sacks himself during his career.
Yeah, he was a guy that was critical in the Bengals' run.
That's right.
To the Super Bowl. And he's kind of like these other guys, though. It's been a couple of years since he had that type of production. He's getting a little older. He is, let's see how old. He's 31 almost.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who is able to create some havoc in the passing game, can drive the pile back a little bit. I've heard some people say that he's not great in the run. I've heard others say he's very good against the run. So who do you believe? It's time to watch the tape.
Right.
Make your own judgments. But, I mean, he's had seasons with a bunch of sacks, like 2018, 5.5, 2019, 5.5, 2020, 2.5, 2021 with Cincinnati. That was that year I was talking about. They went to the Super Bowl, 7 sacks, right? And then he said 1.5, 3, 1.5. Hey, if you could get some of that production out of him, they'll take it because we've talked time and again. More push from the defensive line, more push from the defensive tackles, both in disrupting the pass game and the running game for the Bills. So this is a guy who I think mostly has played 3 technique, which is at Oliver's position. So maybe he's a rotational piece with Ed Oliver, but somebody that can give you some juice when Ed Oliver's out of the game on those passing situations to where he's not just completely worn down and the only defensive tackle that you really trust in passing situations to get a push.
Yeah, and that's something that this team needs. Another defensive end, Michael Hoyt.
Hoyt, you got it, dude. I messed it up the other day when we had Sal Capaccio on from WGR.
You told me. That's why I've been laser focused.
So
on
Michael Hoyt, his last name is spelled Hoecht. It looked like hacked or hashed. And my sister's married name, my brother-in-law's last name is Hecht, Hecht. So I kept saying Hecht, and I knew it was Hoyt. I had looked it up. I heard the pronunciation, and as soon as Sal came on, I said it wrong. And he goes to correct me, and I go, Sal, even before you get there, it's Hoyt. I know it's Hoyt. I'm sorry, Michael. It's Hoyt.
And then you said to me you had a Kevin Carroll moment during the podcast.
Yeah, you've had a couple already today. You proved my point.
Oh,
Derek Forrest.
Foster.
Foster.
Derek Foster. Who's Derek Foster?
I don't know. Are you thinking of Barry Foster, like the Steelers running back?
No, I'm thinking of part of Tombstone where it's something Foster, where the guy's yelling at the Doc Holliday.
There is Derek Foster, who was a football player.
Was he on the Bills at one point?
I don't know. It looks like he was. I'm looking this up real time. Interesting stuff here. The Jets. I don't know.
We can move on.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay, Kair Elum. His time in Buffalo, short-lived, former first-round pick, gets moved to the Cowboys. Maybe a fresh start for him does them some good. Maybe a different style of defense helps Kair Elum, but he just wasn't a fit here in Buffalo. That's one big swing and a miss for the Bills front office that has done pretty well when it comes to the draft. But that one,
That's the biggest miss by Brandon Beane, for sure. And it just didn't work out for whatever reason. You trade up in the first round to get him. You needed a cornerback. I think they may have, I don't know if panic is the right word, but when Trent McDuffie went off the board of the Chiefs, and then they're like, look, we only have this guy left in our tier. We need a cornerback. Trey White was coming off the first injury, right, the ACL.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we need a guy. And for whatever reason, it didn't fit.
Then they got Christian Benford in the same draft.
In the 6th round. And so that kind of washed it out a little bit, but
right.
Wouldn't you rather have 2 guys that hit, especially your first-round pick?
Uh-huh.
But, yeah, Elum, it wasn't for a lack of trying. That guy worked hard, said all the right things to the media, but I think his confidence was lost a little bit. I think it was tough on him at times, not seeing the field. I remember a couple of years ago he said, look, this is the first time in my life where football's been a struggle.
Right.
And that's hard to do, right? That's the guy with NFL pedigree, uncle, father, all that stuff, NFL pedigree, athletes, played at Florida, big-time school, and then you get to the NFL and it just kind of stops.
I remember, if memory serves me correct, his first year with the team, it was he's not showing us enough during practice, but when he got in, he would make plays every now and then.
Yeah, he'd give up a play and then make a play.
I always think of the Steelers playoff game,
right?
Because I wrote down Elum with a bunch of exclamations because he got toasted. And then the very next play, he gets an interception in the end zone.
Right.
And I think such a roller coaster with him at the cornerback position. And then when they got Rasul Douglas, it was just taken care of. Right.
And the fact that he couldn't even be their third corner, their third outside corner. He was inactive when both Benford and Rasul Douglas were healthy most of the time. Wasn't a special teams contributor. Jamarcus Ingram actually got the snaps there ahead of him because Ingram both played special teams, was involved in their dime package.
Right.
Now, when Douglas was hurt or Benford was hurt and Kair had to come in, then Jamarcus Ingram would slot down into his spot and Elam would play the outside corner position. But then to watch him against the Chiefs when Benford went down, he struggled.
Yeah, I think
really struggled.
That was the nail in the coffin.
Right. And
there.
I had brought up with Sal earlier this week when we did a podcast, kind of the first part of free agency, and we were starting to hear some names, was like, what can they do with him? Can they trade him? Will they trade him? Do they just outright release him, or do they let him just sit on the roster and use him for depth? I'm actually surprised they were able to get the return that they did, and basically
absolutely
a late-round pick swap and adding an extra 5th
right
along the way here. They give up a pick or 2, but at the same time, to get something out of him when it was clear that you weren't interested in using him anymore, and it was clear on film that in his last game against the Chiefs, in the biggest moment, he struggled.
Maybe
it was time to move on.
Yeah, maybe, like I said, maybe it just works out in the Cowboys' defense where he can be effective.
Yeah, and he was a good dude, right? Like,
right.
No ill will towards him. It just for whatever reason, through multiple secondary coaches, different defensive coordinators, it just didn't work out.
Rasul Douglas is a free agent as we record this right now. So what are we looking at when it comes to the cornerback position? We know that was a big concern along with defensive tackle and defensive line is do you go after a cornerback early in the draft?
I think that is becoming a very strong possibility in the first round.
Yeah, I was dead set on defensive tackle, defensive line, but now, not saying that I was going to sit here and say, well, they got Kair Elum, so everything's all right. But now, just the more you look at the cornerback.
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Just in from Tom Pelissero from NFL Media, veteran wide receiver and return specialist Laviska Shenault is signing with the Bills, per his agents.
Wow.
Here, we were talking about breaking news in this podcast. So Laviska Shenault likely to the Bills. Interesting.
All right, another wide receiver, another return guy.
Yeah, he's been around the block a little bit.
I was going to say, I didn't even know he was still playing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, he is 26, going to be 27. Yep. Drafted by the Jaguars, played with Carolina.
Yeah.
Played with Seattle and the Chargers this past season.
Oh, another Charger.
I mean, he had catches-wise the last 2 seasons, 5 and 10. So, return guy.
Yeah. Or maybe a guy who's just here.
Well, keep in mind, they had the rookie last year, Codrington.
Right.
And then when it came time to play him in the playoffs, they didn't use him after he came back from the injury.
And they used
Shakir.
I don't see them using Shakir in that role, although Shakir was real. I mean, the way Shakir can run after catch and run after in the returns is pretty amazing at times.
He's got a couple of kick return. He's got a kick return touchdown in his career. Last season averaged 28.7 yards, so that's pretty good on his kick returns. So,
all right,
yeah,
adding to the wide receiver
Laviska Shenault.
You had me on the edge of my seat,
Yeah.
Andy, when you said breaking news. Josh Allen, we finally heard from him. The first time we heard from him since he won the MVP of the league. He gets this monster deal with monster money guaranteed. This was earlier in the week. I'm sure you and Sal talked about it, but we finally got to hear from him through Zoom in the middle of the week just to get his thoughts. And, you know, it's interesting that while you and I look at the money and it seems outrageous, it seems like talking to him, Allen went to his agents and basically said, listen, I don't want to put the Bills in a bad position. I want to be here to keep winning, wants to finish his career here. Talked about a ton of stuff that the MVP speech he gave was off the top of his head and all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, people are going to take the interesting part that he was guaranteed the most money in NFL history, but in his Josh way said, look, I didn't want to kill them on the salary cap. So he takes roughly $5 million annually less, which is $55 million, which is an outrageous amount of money, than what Dak Prescott makes.
Right.
I believe Joe Burrow, somewhere in there. And he's still one of the higher paid quarterbacks in the league, but he's not at the top. And he gets to say, look, what's $5 more million in my life, right?
I know that
when I just got paid a guaranteed $250 million, what's $5 million to him?
that made my stomach sink when I heard it.
It's like $1,000 to you or me.
Right.
Maybe even less.
What's another $500?
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, we don't make a lot of money in this business.
But
it's for the love of the game.
Right. And Josh basically will be a Buffalo Bill, I think, until he retires, or I don't know. It seems like these quarterbacks always try to make one more run, especially if they win a few championships with another team. But we'll see how it plays out. So, I mean, that was
my guy Slick Rick, that whole thing.
Slick Rick, I was trying to remember.
Yeah,
his name.
that was cool because Josh said that he brought up Slick Rick, who's the mailroom employee who went viral after Josh mentioned his name during his speech.
Josh said he apologized to him because he did it off the top of his head, and he didn't want to pull him in and complicate his life by mentioning him.
Well, I complicated it by going out and doing a story on him, which went viral and had millions of views. But the dude was super emotional.
Right.
That, hey, somebody cared and remembered me. Off the cuff.
Yeah.
In an MVP speech on the national stage. Slick Rick got a car out of it.
Yeah.
He's good to go.
That's awesome. Let's do a little 3 and out before we head out, Andy, and look around the league, NFL free agent signings for teams. I am, because we brought it up earlier, a little annoyed that Mac Hollins went to the Patriots. He was fun to cover. I mean, he had some big games down the stretch with some big catches and a great special teams player as well. I know there's bigger names moving around like Metcalf going to the Steelers and stuff like that. But anything pop out to you? I don't think Myles Garrett staying with the Browns, like what we thought the Bills would go after got wiped out in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
Metcalf to the Steelers. Myles Garrett signs that extension, and that's just off the table.
It hasn't been that interesting of
Yeah.
a free agent class. That like a lot of it was the trades.
Are you at all interested in where Aaron Rodgers might go?
I am sick of Aaron Rodgers. I heard someone today bring up that he might go to Minnesota, which would be the Brett Favre same path.
Oh,
Jets to Minnesota.
yeah.
But it's like, what is it? The Giants and the Steelers are kind of waiting on him to make
Right.
a decision, and then their guys are out the door. Like Russell Wilson, I think, is meeting with the Giants and the Browns.
We're no, not the Raiders.
And so I think,
Okay.
and then say that Rodgers retires or doesn't end up with the Steelers. They just did re-sign Mason Rudolph. And it's like, all right, so now you have George Pickens and DK Metcalf, and who's throwing to him? So that's interesting in that regard. I'm a little tired of Rodgers, but whatever. He's still a good player. He had a decent season with the Jets,
Right.
but that place is just a train wreck.
Why not go to the Giants and just go to the other locker room?
What, end Brian Dable's head coaching career?
Well, he's on his last legs anyway.
That's what I'm saying. So he
put
just,
the nail in the coffin for
right,
Brian
he did it to
Dable.
Robert Saleh. Is he going to do it next down the street across the hall for Brian Dable?
Aaron Rodgers cleaning up New York City.
Oh, my God.
All right, the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, Andy.
Love it.
World Video Game Hall of Fame finalist was announced recently. I'm looking at some of these games. They run the gamut here. Age of Empires, I know the commercial. Angry Birds, huge when that came out. Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare.
Modern Warfare?
Atari's Defender, which, as I said when I saw that as a kid, that comes out in 1981. That's right in my wheelhouse. I thought that game stunk. So it might be a finalist, but Frogger, GoldenEye, 007. Our buddy John and I were talking about the slap model, which I just found a riot. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
What was it called? Slapfest or something?
Yes. GoldenEye also has, to me, one of the best theme songs of a video game ever. Like, you put that on the Nintendo 64
Yeah.
and start playing that James Bond theme. Burr, 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 burr.
I never
So
played
good.
it.
Yeah.
Don't know it. Golden Tee, love Golden Tee. Some of these other ones I don't know, but they have the old Mattel football game on this list, Andy. A little before your time, 1977. And I would love to have a picture of it, but it's really just like your iPhone with a little tiny screen,
Okay.
and you could go up
Yeah, I
or
got it
down,
right here.
left or
I
right.
Googled it.
And the little dots, it was impossible to play. It was obnoxious.
Looks like a ball of fun.
Yeah, but I remember getting one and playing with it for hours, even though you couldn't do much. But
All right. Pick your top three. I'm going to go with,
NBA 2K is on here.
yeah, I'm going to say NBA 2K.
Yeah.
GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's hard to say. Then is it Call of Duty? Is it Frogger or Golden Tee? Golden Tee at a bar when you're in college,
Oh, yeah.
quarter beers or quarter pitchers, rip some Golden Tee, some Buck Hunter.
I'm with you on that.
I'm more of a classic video game guy, so I'm gonna go NBA 2K, awesome. GoldenEye, awesome. Probably the best game for N64. And I'm gonna say Call of Duty.
All right, I've never played Call of Duty. I'm more of a sports video game guy my entire life.
Your grandma plays Angry Birds.
NBA, you calling my wife my grandmother?
Yes, Claire.
She's moved on from Angry Birds to some Yahtzee-looking thing.
I have played Angry Birds many times, so.
NBA 2K, I'll go with Frogger, Golden Tee, and even though I never played it, I've heard so much about GoldenEye that I have to have those 4 in.
You got to look up GoldenEye on YouTube. Or I'll bring in my Nintendo Switch sometime. I've got the online account where you can play the old games.
Nice.
We'll fire up.
All right.
A little GoldenEye.
We'll do that. We always do what you watching. I got nothing. Usually, I told you about a show last week that I was watching that I bailed on 5 minutes into the 3rd episode, that Session 81 or whatever it was called. But my wife and I have kind of taken to Tubi, watching old movies and old TV shows. I watched a lot of old news radio with Phil Hartman.
So you've hit that point in life.
I'm there.
You're watching the black and white Andy Griffith show, and like our parents' generation.
We were
watching Gunsmoke and the Andy Griffith show.
We were watching old Cary Grant movies.
Well, you're really throwing it back then.
But I loved Cary Grant in some of the movies he was in. He was one of Hitchcock's favorites. I took a course on Alfred Hitchcock once in college, so I'm locked in on it.
You've crossed the 50 plateau, and you've just fully embraced it.
Got to.
You're like, I'm 50 going on 70.
I think someone was talking about music the other day, and I believe my cutoff was 2010. I don't think I've listened to anything new music-wise since 2010.
We were talking about that on the way to the Combine. You remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what Pink Pony Club was.
And now you can't stop singing it.
Now the song's stuck in my head.
Chapel Roan, Kevin Carroll.
But I will literally just go on YouTube and look up old, like, put in one-hit wonders from the 90s and see it and look up the old music video.
I wonder how many people who watch and listen to this think this is the best part of the podcast.
I like talking about myself, so.
I know. We're far more knowledgeable about old movies and sports and video games.
Heck yeah. I do want to try and check out that Zero Day. I think it's a series that's out.
Yeah, somebody was telling me to watch that too, so maybe
I might give it a whirl.
Yeah.
Claire told me to watch it by myself. So that's one of those you're on your own watching it. I like apocalypse type of movies, end of times type of movies, zombie movies and stuff like that. And the future is dark and so bad. So I'm in for it. I think it has something to do like that. So
yeah, okay, cool. Let me know how that goes for you.
That will be for 20 minutes on next week's podcast. 20-minute breakdown of Zero Day.
All right.
We'll do it off the top.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for us for now. We will be back next week. As free agency continues, we start inching closer to the draft as well.
And if the Bills make some sort of a massive move, a huge signing or a trade, a little emergency podcast.
We can
as long
do
as
that.
it doesn't happen on the weekend. We've got a march in the St. Patrick's Day parade in Buffalo.
Right. St. Patrick's Day parade comes first. Free agency second.
Big St. Patrick's Day guy?
I hate corned beef and cabbage.
You're very Irish.
I am very Irish. I have a lot of St. Patrick's Day Carroll related t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sucker when you're scrolling through like Facebook and an ad comes up. Get a t-shirt with your name on it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I got a couple of St. Patrick's Day ones, but you know, amateur day when it comes to drinking beers.
I know that you're not a big basketball fan, but you grew up in Boston. I picture you like sitting on a couch in somebody's front lawn in college wearing a Robert Parrish jersey.
Robert Parrish lived in my town for a while where I grew up.
The Chief.
I think Danny Ainge did too.
Yeah. You rock a Kevin McHale jersey, drinking green beer at Sacred Heart. I can see it now.
Dude,
Go ahead.
Tank tops don't work for me.
No.
No.
Sun's out, guns out. Doesn't work for you.
We tried that a few years ago. Didn't work.
Hey, before you go and we ruin the rest of this podcast experience for you, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, give us a rating, share it. We would be forever grateful and in your debt.
As always, thanks for joining us, everyone.